Hi, welcome to BizJet TV. My name is Fabrizio Poli, and today's episode I'm going to give you a market update on what's happening in the private jet world and look at some opportunities that are out there. We'll be looking at the market, what's happening with aircraft sales, what's been happening during lockdown. We'll be talking about ETP ratios, which is really important if you're looking at buying a pre-owned aircraft. I'll explain what that is, what to look for, what not to look for, and then we'll be looking at the prices of jets and where they're actually going. So interesting episode for you today, an update which is very much needed. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, BizJet TV, I encourage you to subscribe to BizJet TV. This is all about private aviation and other things to do with flying machines. We cover also subjects about electrical vertical takeoff and landing and space sometimes. We do interviews with experts and people that have got some interesting aviation projects and views and that's what we do here. Also comment below after this video. We'd love to hear from you, hear your suggestions, hear your recommendations, and that gives us a thumbs up. That's all from me on this intro. Let's get straight into update on the market and off we go. Get into the market, see what's happening. Now, if we look at private jet sales, comparing April 2020 to April 2019, sales are down by 50%. And someone could say, oh, that's really bad. Only half the jets are selling, sales are down, blah, 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 blah. But if we look at the number of jets on the market, there aren't that many more jets come on the market. I mean, the average right now is 10.3%. We are looking, industry average is usually around about 10%. So it's only a slightly more higher number of private jets for sale right now than the normal situation. And that's because, people are looking at the market. Obviously, they're not buying a jet because where you're going to go. I mean, lockdown is still in effect in many countries, and other countries do have a 2-week quarantine. And the purpose of buying a private jet is to be able to go in and out quickly. So, if you've got the problem that, you're going to fly to Hong Kong, like I had talking to this gentleman just a couple of weeks ago, he needed to go to Hong Kong. And the problem is if you get to Hong Kong, you have to go into quarantine for 2 weeks. So he decided to scrap the trip. And this is the sort of thing that's happening. Now, I think, and I've said this before on BizJet TV, that once this lockdown is eased, and probably once the US election is out the way, we're going to see a surge in private jet sales and usage. We already start to see the market waking up now. More people are jumping off the fence as lockdown is being eased. Now, let's look at a couple of things. Now, first of all, my prediction is the market's going to grow at just over 513,000 ultra high net worth individuals in the world. Only 3.5% own a private jet. I think we're going to see that number go above 10% over the next 2 to 3 years. And so that means, almost tripling the private jet fleet. So where are those airplanes going to come from? Well, of course, we've got two things. The manufacturers are making new aircraft, but also we have to look at the older aircraft and about, refurbishing those airplanes and keep them flying. So that way we can, keep those older jets flying and bring the new jets in, and that way we will increase the number of airplanes out there from around about, 22,000 jets right now to maybe 40,000, maybe 50, 60,000 jets. And of course, there's also the turboprops to add to that, and turboprops can be very useful as well, in particular in the short hops. So we're going to look at something now which is called ETP ratio, which is something you need to look at, in particular when you're buying a pre-owned aircraft. Now, the ETP ratio, ETP stands for maintenance exposure to ask price. And what you basically do is you take the airplane maintenance exposure, which means what future maintenance events are there in the next 12 months, for example, and how much is that going to cost? And you divide that by the asking price and you come up with a percentage. Now, when you're looking at these ratios, for example, and I'll give you some examples here. If we take, for example, the Challenger 650, Challenger 650 has an ETP ratio of 5%. The Gulfstream G650ER has a ratio of 3.9%. Falcon 2000 XLS has a ratio of 5.3%. Falcon 7X has a ratio of 8.1%. Now, these numbers are low. If the number's under 40%, these aircraft will sell fairly quickly. If the number's over 40%, it's going to take anywhere between 30 to 50% more time to sell the aircraft. And some of the aircraft that have these high ETP ratios are, for example, Gulfstream G4SP. These are older aircraft at 71.9%. Global Express, the older models, the ones that are 20 years old plus, 76.8%. Lear 60, 93%. And you've got Challenger 601. There are different variants of the 601, and that can vary anywhere from 120 to 189%. Now, that doesn't mean that these aircraft that have a high ETP ratio are ones you need to stay away from, because there are opportunities there. For example, take the G4SP, for example. You can buy these aircraft for like $2.5–3 million, completely refurbish them. And if you're not going to be flying that much, and I'd say if you're flying under 250 hours a year, even maybe 300, depending on where you go and the type of airplane you're buying, if you're going to be flying a low number of hours, buying an older aircraft and refurbishing it is a good way to go. But be very careful in choosing the aircraft, because what you don't want to do, if you've got something that's got a very high ETP ratio, not only do you have to have a very thorough pre-buy inspection and make sure that there are no hidden problems with the airplane, which could explain why maybe the owner has decided to sell it as it is and not to have the work done. And then the second thing is, once you acquire the aircraft, you have to make sure you've got a good technical team that knows where to take the aircraft to have the work done. Because there are good maintenance places and bad maintenance places, a bit like when you take your car to the mechanics. There are good mechanics and bad mechanics. It's the same with private jets. So it's very important when you are going to acquire an aircraft that's older, and usually people that buy an aircraft that's older is because they don't have the money to buy a new one. Otherwise, they'll spend the $50 million to buy a new one, or a newer one, something inside 5 years. That's always a good possibility, particularly if you're flying more hours. Most aircraft brand new have got a warranty of 5 years, and covered in that warranty, some of the manufacturers actually include maintenance, which means you won't be paying any maintenance for 5 years. And if you're doing a high number of hours, that's certainly a good way to go. So these are all things that need to be considered. But when you're going for the older aircraft, you have to really, really do your due diligence carefully. Because even though you may think, oh, I just bought a jet for $3 million, you may end up spending another $3 million on maintenance, and that may take 6 months, 8 months, depending on what needs to be done on the aircraft. So don't think, I need to go on the cheap. Private jets are not cheap. They're not cheap to buy. They're not cheap to operate, and they're not cheap to maintain. So these are things you have to really look at. And I can only really give you general information here on BizJet TV. If you are seriously thinking of buying a private jet, you need specific information. I mean, what is your objective? Let's look at where you're going and all this kind of thing. And so a one-to-one conversation is certainly something that needs to happen. And you can go and visit us, Kaizen Aerospace, and send us an email, and we will book you in for a call. Now, the other thing I'd like to talk about is aircraft values right now. We have seen the larger jets come down in value by about 6.4%. And that's because the larger jets go further afield, so they have more range, and because international travel has been jeopardized by lockdown in various countries. Some countries you're not allowed to go in, some countries you can, but then you have to quarantine for 2 weeks. So what's the point in traveling if you have to be there for 2 weeks and then come home and then be confined to your home for another 2 weeks? That keeps you out of the equation for a whole month. So that's justifying why the prices of these larger jets has come down by 6.4%. We see in the medium it's 3.4%. It's come down, and then the smaller jets 1.3%, and the turboprops 2.3%. Now, what we're actually seeing is throughout Europe there's movement of the smaller jets back and forth, and inside domestic United States we're seeing a lot of travel happening. Most of its owners using their aircraft, going from A to B to C to D, sometimes from one house to another. Meetings are starting to resume now, face-to-face meetings, even though a lot of people have found things like Zoom to be very effective. But face-to-face meetings are starting to happen again, and so people are traveling, domestically inside the United States and inside Europe. There is a certain amount of movement, and we've seen traffic increase. If you look at all the numbers on private jet charters and things like that, the numbers are starting to get closer to what they usually are. They're probably around about 15 to 20% less than they usually are this time of the year. So these are all things to look at, but the big picture, looking long term, in particular, once the US election is out of the way, and that, I think we're going to see a lot of private jet travel. I mean, it will depend also on who gets elected in the United States. It's going the information I'm getting, it looks like Donald Trump's going to be re-elected again, which is going to be good for business jet travel and business in general, because he's very much, as we've seen over the course of his term, he's reduced taxes and he's also reduced regulation, and in particular with private jet acquiring private jets and whatever. There's a lot of new rules, not rules, but less rules around private jet acquisition and taxes and writing off aircraft charters and ownership and all that kind of thing. But again, that's if you're based in the United States. but that will have a knock-on effect on the private jet market. So that's what I see. I think we're going to see more and more people turn to private jets. So if you are in business and you have got the money to acquire a jet, or maybe even lease a jet for 12 months to 18 months, whatever it may be, that's something you need to look into, but we need to be specific. So talk to me or talk to another aviation advisor that you, maybe a trusted one that you have, or somebody else out there. There's plenty. That I'm not saying come to me, but you can come to me and your team, my team, if you want to. And that's really all from me on this episode of BizJet TV. Just wanted to give you this update on the market. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, I encourage you to subscribe to BizJet TV. Give us a thumbs up and check out the different models of aircraft that are out there. Check this thread of videos. I'm sure you'll find that interesting. And that's all from Fabrizio Poli on BizJet TV, and I'll see you on the next one.